2024 SEC football schedule reveal. For the next 2 hours, we are taking you through 2024's schedule in the SEC week by week. You're going to get to make all your plans, figure everything out, and of course, it's an exciting time because we welcome in 2 new teams in Oklahoma and Texas. What does their schedule look like, and which team has the most difficult schedule? That and so much more coming your way here on ESPN for the next 2 hours. It starts right now. Hello, college football, our old and unfailing friend.
There's storylines galore.
The passion the SEC has for its teams is special.
It's your day. Go season. It's time to kick off the SEC season. Hey, hurdles into the end zone. Fires down the right side. One-handed catch, leaping in the air. Pearsall. Are you kidding me? Do your game, man. Firing, near corner, it's caught! Touchdown, Alabama! Texas is back, folks! Touchdown, Nick Anderson!
They're just going to make the conference even stronger.
The commitment to excellence in the SEC, this is a step up in competition.
Honestly, it was really cool to see Texas and Oklahoma, even in that highlight reel, know that they are joining the SEC. Welcome. This is going to be a fun 2 hours, okay? Joey Galloway, Tim Tebow, Greg McElroy. We also have Paul Feinbaum joining us throughout this show as we reveal the 2024 SEC schedule. It's all going to be here soon enough. Paul, I'll give you the first word since I know you are just...
He's sort of Mr. SEC, so you should give Paul the first word.
He is, the mouth of the South. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I feel qualified to say this since I've covered the SEC probably more than almost all the cumulative ages of the people on this panel tonight. So this is truly one of the most extraordinary and exciting nights in the SEC history because a lot of conferences have expanded. Only this league has brought in Texas and Oklahoma, already one of the CFP finalists for this year. And I think when people watch and see what is going to be happening in terms of the week-to-week, they are going to be blown away.
It's always funny when Paul mentions how long he's been doing it. He's looked the same since I've been in TV. He hasn't aged one day since I've seen Paul in the beginning. But how exciting is this? And we're putting this out there months before we're going to get to see any of this. So we're going to be really excited tonight about what's coming up. But then we got to relax because it's just bowl season.
I know.
Bowl season.
But it's not just teams. It's brands. It's everything that they're bringing to the SEC. I mean, everything that encompasses Texas, the excitement, the state, and then Oklahoma. And I think Oklahoma's also on the rise. They're going to continue to get better with Coach Venables, what he's doing. He's building that team, building that program. It's not just 2 new teams. It is 2 massive programs that the SEC is blessed to have.
It's a couple things. One, this should be a college football annual holiday. It really should. I mean, this is what we are going to be able to kind of look at. We're trying to bridge the gap, right? I mean, the NIL world, everything about realignment is kind of the coaching carousel. It fills the offseason with typical fodder. This is celebratory. I mean, we get to talk about matchups, teams, rankings, and a league in the SEC that if you look at the CFP final rankings, 7 of the top 13 teams will have their 2024 schedule released tonight. So it's remarkable the depth and quality.
We're going to go week by week. A couple of points that we want to remind everybody. This is the first year since 1991 that there are no divisions in the SEC. So just the top 2 teams get to play for the SEC championship. And of course, there's a lot to get to there. I want to take you guys through exactly the thought process with the scheduling, though, okay? Because a lot was going into this to make it work. With Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, the schedule looks a little bit different, okay? Still 8 conference games. Divisions are eliminated. They jumped ahead a little bit here, but I do think this is important, okay? Logistics were a big deal with a 14-week season. So, as you're seeing here, a couple of things have already been revealed. Georgia at Texas, that game happening very early on. And then also Alabama at Oklahoma. This toward the end of the Sooners' first season in the SEC, hosting the Crimson Tide for the second time. They won 37-27 in 2002. So then on the Manning cast with Peyton and Eli, those a couple of SEC guys. So they got to reveal some games as well. And you see Ole Miss at LSU for that one on week 7. That's an opportunity for Ole Miss, already traveling there October 12th. That same week, it's a rivalry that we know really well and something that Peyton is very aware of too. Tennessee and Florida, another game that was revealed on the Manning cast. So you definitely want to circle that week as a great one. Tennessee, by the way, has 4 straight home games from October 12th to November 9th. More on that in just a little bit, because we'll get to the entirety of the schedules as 2024 is approaching. On Good Morning America this morning, a monster matchup was announced. This is a rematch of this year's SEC championship. Georgia at Alabama. That's September 28th, which is week 5. So another opportunity for these two teams to meet in a very tough road test for Georgia, going to Tuscaloosa at that point. 7:30 Eastern on ABC. The Disney family of networks is going to have all of these games. It's going to be so much fun to watch between ABC and ESPN, and of course all of the other networks, the SEC network as well. When you think about the games we've already seen, we're going to get to the rest of them in a little bit, but Greg, what sticks out to you, maybe specifically that Georgia at Alabama?
It goes there. I mean, right now those are the top 2 programs in the sport. Whatever order you have them in is perfectly fine. I personally might not necessarily always agree with the order that some have it in. I still think that Bama and Georgia are neck and neck. I might lean towards Bama just ever so slightly.
Just a little
what
bit.
they've done over the last 14 years. But I digress. I mean, the 2 top teams in the sport going to Tuscaloosa for that game, bragging rights on the line, national championship implications on the line, the possibility for a bye in the 12-team playoff, the possibility to get to the conference title game knowing that Georgia still has to go to Texas later in the season. So I think that game is pivotal, and every time they tee it up, it's a big one.
Yeah, where my mind goes is, where could you have some favorable matchups in these schedules? And I think you look at Tennessee, you mentioned those home games, but also Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a very favorable schedule that's a lot easier than Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Florida. So both of those teams, they got a lot of players coming back. If you can fill in some of the right pieces, could one of them make a run?
Yeah, a lot of times it depends on who you have to play during your regular season.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen Alabama play Georgia in the last few years, and that's been a lot of talk is Georgia has avoided playing Alabama in the regular season. So had they had an easier path to get to the SEC championship game? Well, now we get to see that game during the regular season, and we might see it again in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, the way these were set up, Paul, there are 2 byes for every team in this new schedule. What sticks out to you with the games that have already been revealed, Paul?
Laura, I've spent a lot of time covering the Iron Bowl, Alabama versus Auburn, and the idea that Alabama has to go to Oklahoma the week before as opposed to playing Mercer or some other cupcake is extraordinary, and I'm sure it will give Nick Saban heartburn tonight.
Yeah, well, you always have to go there. All right, let's get into it. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's see this thing. Paul, I want to cheer from you. Let's start with the non-conference games in week 1. You've got Miami at Florida. Tim, that one is going to be a lot of fun in Gainesville.
What a battle for the state of Florida this year, because Florida also plays Florida State. Miami does as well, so we'll find out who's state champs. This is the first time that Miami has gone to Gainesville since we played Miami in 2008. It'll be a fascinating matchup.
Joey, Georgia versus Clemson in Atlanta week 1.
Dabo Swinney said you better buy as much Clemson stock as you can. Then they went on a 4-game win streak to end their season, and now they have Georgia early on. So we're going to find out how good that stock is early in the season.
Paul, week 1, Notre Dame at Texas A&M.
I mean, that is just an incredible game to start the season. You have a brand new coach in Mike Elko at A&M. You have Marcus Freeman trying to get to the playoff in his 3rd year. This will be a dizzying day to try to keep up with football.
How about LSU and Southern Cal in Vegas, Greg?
Yeah, one of the great days of the college football calendar, that Sunday window with LSU and Southern Cal. Defense optional in this one, if 2023 is any indicator, but both teams will be replacing incredible Heisman-winning quarterbacks.
So there you see it. The week 1 schedule, August 31st, unless noted, as you see that LSU Southern Cal game September 1st. You've got a few different matchups to look out for there, as you see the ones that we've talked about already. But how about the rest of the games? Week 1, some easy starts for some of these teams. Greg, what sticks out to you as you see the rest of the slate?
Well, that you called them easy starts. I mean, you can't. There's no easy starts. I mean, this.
there's a few that
Okay, fair enough.
cupcake.
I'm just saying.
I don't want to rip on anybody here.
I'm with you. The one that would stand out would be Old Dominion at South Carolina. Old Dominion's been a little dangerous for some ACC foes in the past, so that would be one that I'd circle in trying to replace Spencer Rattler.
Let's go to week 2, everybody. The first SEC game of the year is South Carolina at Kentucky. The Gamecocks and Wildcats both have 2 SEC games in the first 3 weeks before 10 teams even play their conference opener. So they have to get started a little bit earlier than others for that. Also, week 2, an incredible matchup outside of the SEC for Texas. Texas and Michigan, the first regular season meeting between these two teams, the second road game versus Big Ten opponent in program history. I can't wait for that one. Couple playoff teams, by the way, Tim.
No doubt. Also, what a matchup of uniforms and brands. What an exciting game this is, going to the big house, two of the best teams in the country.
The other notable games, you see South Florida and Alabama. We saw Alabama go to South Florida this last year. And looking at Mississippi State versus Arizona State. Joey, anything else stick out to you?
Yeah, when you talk about South Florida and Alabama and they played this season, that was when Jalen Milroe got benched. And it was a rough outing for Alabama. And what a quarterback he's become since that game against South Florida.
We just passed it, but I mean, just a traditional ACC SEC matchup a moment ago when Cal takes on Auburn too. So don't sleep on that one.
And Arkansas, Oklahoma State. I think that'll be a fascinating matchup. We'll see if Arkansas is able to bounce back from a tough season.
They have a tough schedule again, and we'll get to that. Hey, week 3, let's carry on here. Alabama at Wisconsin. This is the second true road game versus a Big Ten opponent. Of course, they won at Penn State in 2011. This one sticks out as an opportunity for those tied, Greg.
Yeah, and Phil Longo, OC at Wisconsin, gave Alabama some fits at time when he was at Ole Miss. Tyler Van Dyke, Miami quarterback, now transferred to the Badgers.
You see Alabama at Wisconsin, September 14th of the week 3. Those are the notable games. Boston College at Missouri, Georgia at Kentucky. That's an interesting one. LSU at South Carolina. The list goes on and on of interesting matchups. Tim, you're itching to get in. What do you want to say?
Let's not forget how good Tulane has been in big games. Going to Oklahoma, yes, Oklahoma should be favored, but Tulane is really good at upsetting some really good football teams.
Let's get you ready for week 4 with a little bit of a reminder here. Okay, this is the rest of week 3, So we'll see those there. Vandy at Georgia State. And as we get you ready for week 4, let's remind you that the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers once won the national championship. Josh Heupel winning it at Oklahoma.
Josh Heupel, who could run for governor right now. Heupel, in a lofted long man out there. He's got him! Dennis Fagan, touchdown, Oklahoma! Heupel dances around. He might try to get this one on the ground. He hits to the corner. He's in! The champions of the 67th FedEx Orange Bowl are the still undefeated and now finally respected Sooners of Oklahoma.
Okay, so our week 4 schedule, as you can see, Tennessee and Oklahoma, their first meeting since 2015, first meeting in Norman since 2014. Paul Feinbaum, what do you think?
I think it's extraordinary because Josh Heupel, as many remember, was really ushered out of Norman, Oklahoma. There's going to be a lot of revenge and emotion on his mind, but it's also an opportunity for Tennessee to make a statement.
We continue our SEC football schedule reveal with the rest of week 4. Florida and Mississippi State. Tim, that one sticks out to me.
It's never been easy for Florida. But also UCLA at LSU. LSU is just playing the California schools. We'll see how they do it against Cali.
That's a good point. Joey, what sticks out to you here as you look at the rest of week 4?
Yeah, I was just thinking UCLA now a Big Ten school. You know, when you think about the California coming to LSU, it's now a Big Ten school. And we're going to see what Mike Elko has Texas A&M looking like. There's a lot of conversation about who was going to be the coach at Texas A&M before Elko got that job. So we'll see what he's building at Texas A&M.
I'll tell you, he doesn't have a lot of time to get him ready.
No, he doesn't.
Start off hot.
We talked to him at the SEC Championship. He said he wanted to get there. Okay, week 5. Look, here we go. Mississippi State at Texas, Greg.
Really interesting, too. I mean, Jeff Levy, very familiar with Texas, beat him as the coordinator at OU this year. Now he's the head coach of Mississippi State, so he knows the formula.
There's the rest of the week 5 schedule. Kentucky at Ole
They
Miss.
can throw that in there like, oh, by the way, Georgia, Alabama's playing that weekend also.
By
the way.
Yeah.
You don't realize all
We're already talking about that again.
We're not even mentioning Oklahoma at Auburn.
There's so many good ones, and I know we're going through this fast and furious. We will talk about all
by the
of
way,
these.
yeah, Georgia plays Alabama.
We'll talk about all of these schedules in the rest of the show. We're on until 9, okay, folks? So we've got more time here to get through it. Joey, as you think about what you've seen so far, what are you taking away?
I think everyone is interested to see when does Oklahoma play their first SEC game and when does Texas play their first SEC game. We've seen that in the first 5 weeks, so that'll be interesting. And Alabama going to Wisconsin. They picked the right time of year to go. early in the year
For me,
before
it's
it
the
gets
big
cold.
non-conference games. Playing against Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan, Notre Dame. Look at these big matchups against incredible brands. I think that's so good for the SEC, but also so good for college football.
But kind of like what next year is a little bit of a litmus test. Not all of us are real sure how the non-conference games are going to factor in as it relates to the 12-team expanded playoff. I think, could it be like basketball where if you have a really strong non-conference, you get rewarded even if you lose one of those games? If you play the team competitive, maybe they benefit you. So I'm glad to see not just the SEC, but all of the sport really embracing these home and homes too, because the home field environment is something that we need to continue to support.
Paul?
You're already seeing the vagaries and the complexity of the schedule, Laura. The fact that Georgia and Alabama on September 21st already have a bye week. That was done but to try to keep that game even. But it's very complex when you try to mix and match all this. And I don't know if any coach wants a bye week that early in the season.
Yeah, I don't envy anyone trying to create this schedule, keeping all of those things in mind. One thing, too, that's sticking out to me, guys, is you try to think about the matchups. We don't even know who's going to be on these teams yet. As transfer portal action is happening right now, early signing period, there's so much that could change about what we think these teams are going to look like by the time they actually play. You ready for week 6? Everyone caught their breath? Let's keep going, okay? As we head into week 6, and what you need to look out for here. Tennessee at Arkansas. We talked about the difficulty of Arkansas' schedule. We'll dive into that a little bit more. UCF at Florida, Mizzou at A&M, Ole Miss at South Carolina, and Auburn at Georgia. That's an Auburn team that looks really good against some really top teams in Georgia and Alabama this year.
They played them so well, but also the state of Florida. Who will win the state of Florida? UCF, who's getting so much better at Florida. Florida plays all the big schools in the state. That'll also be a fascinating matchup.
Should we move right to week 7, you guys? Because here is a fascinating one that SEC fans are going to get the first experience of. Texas against Oklahoma in Dallas, by the way. Greg, you grew up with this rivalry.
Yeah, I've been to 9 of them. 1 as a broadcaster and 8 as a fan. And to me, it's going to be surreal to see those two teams take the field with the SEC patch on their jersey. It's just going to be mind-blowing to think about.
I just got chills as you said that. So you can see October 12th, week 7, Texas and Oklahoma, highlighting that one. Ole Miss at LSU.
That's a good week right there.
One, right?
That's a good week.
Mississippi State at Georgia. I mean, you don't really see a game on that list that isn't at least somewhat interesting.
Missouri, UMass.
I was trying to move past that, okay, but you're right. And it's an open date, as you see at the bottom of the screen, for Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M. Again, Paul pointed out the bye weeks. There's 2 for each of these teams. They still, no matter how it shook out, have 8 conference games, and then the rest of the schedule is filled out with the bye weeks and the non-conference. All right, we've got week 8 next. This is October 19th. 7 SEC games in week 8. LSU at Arkansas, Kentucky at Florida, A&M at Mississippi State, Auburn at Missouri, South Carolina at Oklahoma, Alabama at Tennessee, and Georgia at Texas.
All right, where do you want to start? Because it doesn't even matter. There's so many good games. What a fascinating weekend. What a good weekend to get you a little popcorn, little soda, sit down, football all day.
Any beverage you want.
It's going to be something else too. Yeah,
You look at the Texas game, though. Texas last year, before they played Alabama, they played Rice. This year, or next year, they'll be playing Oklahoma, which has always been their most emotional game. And then the very next week, they have Georgia. How many times can you get your team up emotionally to play in these big games?
And 3 big rivalry games that week, too. You get the 3rd Saturday in October, Bama at Tennessee, always a big one. LSU at Arkansas, Battle of the Boot, and Kentucky against Florida, another big rivalry. So it's important, too, even though we're in a new era, a new frontier of college football scheduling, you have to protect matchups that matter. And the SEC, I think, did a good job of it here in week 8.
Speaking of protecting the matchups that matter, here's week 9. LSU at Texas A&M on October 26th. This has been a game that historically has been on Thanksgiving. We'll see it a little bit earlier this year. And it's a game that's mattered a lot when it comes to the complexion of both of those teams. Brian Kelly trying to show that this LSU team is for real against Mike Elko's Texas A&M Aggies. Also, Oklahoma at Ole Miss. I can't wait for this one.
Yeah, a few points. And now it's crazy, too. I mean, if that game was played this year, that game determines a playoff spot. I mean, Ole Miss sitting there at 11, Oklahoma's at 12. I mean, the winner would get that last playoff spot.
We will actually show you the bracket of what the 12-team playoff would have looked like this year coming up later in the show, and we'll talk about it as it relates to next season. Go ahead, Tim.
Let's just not look past Missouri at Alabama. How good did Missouri perform this year? So many players coming back at Alabama. I was just talking to one of the best players a few days ago in the SEC, and he said the hardest team he played this year was Missouri.
Yeah, they were ready to go. They were ready to play. They were a tough opponent for so many. Paul, as you see now, week 6, 7, 8, 9, what are you thinking?
There's something that I thought about as we showed the Georgia at Texas. That may not be the biggest event in Austin that weekend. It's also the week of the Formula One race.
Ooh.
Last year, only Prince Harry, among others, showed up. So that is going to be an amazing weekend for sports fans in general.
Leave it to Paul to be
Paul,
an F1
there is
fan.
no chance that you will be watching that. You know you will
I will
be
be there
moving
with
to
Prince
the
Harry.
game.
You are royal in some parts of the country. Joey, what do you see about what we've seen so far now as we've gone toward the latter part of the 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks?
I think Tim touched on it. What Coach Drinkwitz has made it at Missouri, a 10-win football team. And when you look at their schedule, early on, they should win a lot of football games coming to the back half of this season. So if they can keep building on what they did this season, getting to those 10 wins, they have a chance to be a really good football team that has a lot to say in the SEC.
Yeah, and October is where you start to figure out who's going to separate, and November is where you just survive and advance. Because November, in this league in particular, I mean, you're going to have attrition. Your depth is going to be challenged. You're going to have guys that are in and out of the lineup. So getting through the October slate with the 2 bye weeks this year, like you referenced, is huge. But November, when the people see these matchups coming up this final month of the year, they're going to be licking their chops. It's pretty wild.
That was a pretty good tease, Greg, because coming up, we are going to get into the month of November, and you do not want to miss that as you think about next season. This is all coming fast and furious. Old rivalries renewed as well, and some new ones that have been old in other conferences. Now the SEC gets them. We're talking about that Red River rivalry. Also, Oklahoma and Texas is impacting the SEC. That and the November schedule, the end of it. Welcome back to the 2024 SEC football schedule reveal. We've already gotten to week 10. So we went 1 through 9, and we'll be revisiting all of this. If you missed it, don't worry, we're getting back to it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It was a lot.
We'll go through it.
I will say what happened so far is it makes me really excited for the season, but at least we got that. Okay, Florida versus Georgia, Georgia versus Florida, however you want to look at it. Well, it's happening week 10 in Jacksonville. Tim, this is going to be pretty cool. November 2nd this year.
Well, it's always an incredible game, but it's also a massive start for Florida because now they go on a 5-game schedule where all 5 of those teams are in the top 13 of the end of this year's rankings.
Ooh. What do you see here, Greg?
There's a bunch of interesting ones here. Like I said, this is when it starts to get really interesting. Kentucky and Tennessee, always a really interesting matchup for the most part. One to kind of go either way depending on the outcome. A&M and South Carolina, 2 teams that I think could have some surprises this year. I think A&M's still got a good roster. I know a lot of guys are in the portal right now, and South Carolina has done a pretty good job of adding some key pieces in the portal already.
And as you see at the bottom there, Alabama, LSU, and open date. That's because in week 11, they match up at LSU on November 9th, Joey.
Yeah, LSU is one of those teams that has a tremendous amount of talent. And it seems like each season there might be something, one side of the ball that just doesn't show up. And this year it was their defensive side had trouble getting stops. They're a talented football team against an Alabama team, which we expect will be near the top of the SEC once again.
But we also know this, that LSU team plays a lot different at home versus Alabama than they would do when they go to T-Town.
You can see, Greg, how they are preserving some of these rivalries we want to see, but also some new ones. Look at Florida going to Austin.
Yeah, that's interesting, of course. I mean, 2 massive brands in the sport. But how about an old Big 8 rivalry renewed?
Come on, I love
between
it.
Oklahoma and
Let's
Missouri.
go.
A game that does have some history. 08, Tim, you remember,
Yes,
you were
I
watching
do.
that game.
No doubt.
Between Oklahoma and Missouri.
We wanted to get
Are we
in.
playing Bradford
That's
or are we
right.
playing Chase Daniel?
That's it, man.
So that's week 11. Let's move to week 12 on November 16th. Speaking of older rivalries renewed, Texas at Arkansas. The new members of the SEC got to go to Fayetteville.
Laura, you were there with us a few years ago when Texas came to Arkansas, and Arkansas upset them. And what an atmosphere it was. And you just kind of forget about this rivalry and a little bit of hatred between those two programs.
Oh, yeah, and at that point, it was like, hey, Texas might be on to something.
Right.
Arkansas stomped them down. Okay, Joey, what else do you see here on November 16th?
You got Tennessee at Georgia. As some of the other teams, it looks like they're taking a break. You know, Kentucky's going to get a break. Auburn will get a break. Although we did see Auburn trying to take a break this past season with New Mexico State, and that didn't go so well. And then they came the next week and played Alabama really tough. Bama gets a break there. So you see some teams in the back half of the season, they're going to get a game in there where they can breathe a little bit.
A reminder, too, that once again, we are expanding the playoffs. So at this point in the season, so much of this matters. Tim, go.
And another top team Florida's playing. They get LSU at home. What a rivalry that is. And you're just going to continue to see for the last 5 weeks of the schedule, Florida is playing great teams.
It's an opportunity. It could also be a really difficult time. We'll see how the Gators take advantage of that. We carry on with week 13. Remember, this is a 14-week schedule. So week 13, Alabama going to Norman, Greg.
Really interesting game here. And obviously, these two teams have a little history, but it's mostly been in the playoff in the neutral site. Traveling to Norman for the first time in 20 years will be a great opportunity for the players. And what's most interesting is usually that's the week they're playing a very manageable opponent prior to the Iron Bowl the following week.
Tim, you see the SEC games in week 13. November 23rd, of course, Thanksgiving week. That's all of them right there.
Yeah, and some of the games we don't usually get to see. Ole Miss at Florida. How fun is that? There's so many games, and I love the way they did this schedule. We kept a lot of the old rivalries, but we're also kind of figuring out that maybe there could be some new ones too.
It's creative. Joey, here's the non-conference of that week.
I think at this time of the season, it's going to come down to who can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Who's going to be healthy? Who's going to be ready to go at this time of season? Once again, you'll see some teams get a breather at this time. But this is the point in the season where you're starting to look around and see how many healthy bodies can we put out on the field, and it's going to speak to the depth of your football team and how well you recruited.
The playoff will be different, of course, because there's more teams allowed in, but that did matter with these teams that peaked at the right time this year, even in the college football playoff. Week 14, ooh, how about this is going to be fun. Texas at Texas A&M, in-state rivals. This one on November 30th. Greg, that state that you know a whole lot about, that's going to be ripping and roaring for this one.
Yeah, fitting that it's an Aggie land as well. Understandable just how much vitriol in that game. That game being back for the first time in 11 years is going to mean a lot to a lot of folks.
This is the rest of the Week 14 schedule, the SEC games. Oklahoma at LSU.
Incredible weekend. Oklahoma at LSU, Auburn at Alabama. Oh yeah, let's just throw that out there.
Yeah,
like that's just a normal game.
How
Then you
about
got the Egg Bowl.
Levy
It's amazing.
against Kiffin in
Come
that
on.
Egg Bowl? That's going to be fun. Anything else stick out, Joey?
I think when you look at Oklahoma in the back end of their schedule, they have a lot of physical football games, and it's going to speak to, are they physical enough? Now, we know offensively, they can put points on the board, but defensively, can that defense hold up against the physical SEC at the end of the season?
Hey, guys, these rivalry games are, as of today, they're on November 30th, but they could move to Thursday or Friday. So just something to keep in mind as you think about that really important rivalry
We
week
have a
of the
say in
season.
that? Do we get to
You say
weigh in
whatever you
on
want. I mean, you're the
if
one
they
on
move?
TV right
yeah,
now.
I don't think they listen to me.
I think
Okay.
one thing about that for Georgia is they have a really tough schedule, but playing Georgia Tech at the end, it's a rivalry game, but it's an easier rivalry game than a lot of these teams have. So coming down the end of the stretch,
Georgia
I
Tech
mean,
doesn't appreciate that.
hang
'cause
on.
Georgia Tech actually played them pretty
I'm
well
about
this
to say,
season. Like
they
Georgia
did,
Tech
they
was
did play them
in
pretty
that
well.
game.
But who would you
They're
rather
happy
play,
about that.
Georgia Tech or Clemson? Georgia Tech or Florida State?
I would
Georgia's already
hate to
playing
answer
Clemson,
that
so
as we sit here now.
Georgia
but
Tech's got
then,
some team speed, though. They can
do.
rip. I mean, they got some guys that can fly. So,
All right.
so they're all tough. There are no easy games like we established in week 2, except for the ones that are easy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on
I see
what's
what you did
happening,
there.
when it might be easy. Okay, you can see on the side of your screen, the schedules are going to rotate through here for the rest of the show. And the reason why is because we've revealed the whole thing, guys. That's it. That's 2024.
We're done.
Sounds good. We'll see
we
you
can
guys.
go home.
guys next year.
No, you guys don't want to keep talking about this?
We got a lot to
What's
break
wrong
down.
with
I have a
you
lot of
people?
thoughts.
Okay, so go ahead then with your thoughts, Greg. Spit out as many of them as you can get in for a couple minutes
We're
here.
just going to save it for the rest of the show. We got to keep people on the hook,
No,
right?
but
I
I'm
mean,
really asking you, what are your thoughts?
We're doing TV here, Rick.
That's right. We are live. I forgot that.